Back in February at the Final Fantasy XIV announcement showcase, we got our first look at the new expansion, Endwalker, and some of the content coming with it, including a teaser trailer, a new job, and some of the locations we'll be visiting like Thavnair and Garlemald. There was a lot more information that came out of that event about Ishgard housing, new raids, new beast tribes, and quite a bit more. But in this video, we'll be covering what Yoshi P and the team revealed during last week's Digital Fan Fest. Now, we won't be covering every little thing from every Q&A session or doing a ton of speculation, but we'll try to hit on all the major announcements in a reasonable amount of time. Also, a huge shout out to everyone on the Final Fantasy XIV Discord server for the translations of the Japanese-only sections. With that being said, let's jump into the video. First off, we'll get a few big pieces of information out of the way. Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker will be releasing on November 23rd, 2021, and if you pre-order, early access starts on November 19th. A lot of people are kind of memeing this date a little bit because back in February, they simply told us to look for a fall release date, so people were kind of expecting, late September to mid-October. Technically, November 23rd is still fall, even if it's a little late, but it's not winter yet, and I'd rather the team take their time to make sure the expansion lives up to the expectations that we all have for it. Also, with the release of patch 6.1, they'll be introducing new Oceanic Servers. With that, Australian players and other players in that region will no longer be forced to suffer playing on 200 ping in North America or the Japanese servers. And it may be that a lot of players don't want to make the switch because maybe they're static or their free company are on one of those other servers, but they're finally going to have the choice. So with those two big announcements out of the way, we're going to tackle the new trailer a little bit because there is a lot to unpack with the new scenes we got. Obviously, there will be some spoilers here all the way up to and including patch 5.5. So be warned, this will go on through the rest of the video. So if you don't want to see spoilers, go ahead and back out or jump to the wrap up at the end. The first new bit that we see is right after the Warrior of Light's job reveal and the Alpha No job change, and it is Thavnair being attacked by Voidsent. Now these are just your standard run-of-the-mill Voidsent models. I think these were used a bit as like trash mobs in Amarat. And along with them, there are some pretty devastating looking meteors or magic attacks, like kind of raining from the sky. And they're leaving behind these giant crystal structures or ice tower things. It's kind of hard to tell just from the look we get in the video, but all of it together is showing us that this is the repeat of the end times that Imik Selk has already told us about. If the ominous voiceover in the trailer wasn't enough for you. Then we see the sky split open and a large dragon flies through the clouds with a rider on their back. And this rider is pretty obviously Estinian. We don't know anybody else at this point riding dragons. And after the events of patch 5.5, thought the dragon would be Tiamat. If you look though, they look totally different. And sure enough, after dismounting with a beautiful Stardiver, Estinian calls the dragon Vritra, who is another of the first brood that at this point we have not seen. We don't know much about Vritra yet, other than he's the youngest of the 7 members of the first brood. And this does mean that the only member of the first brood we haven't seen yet is Ozdaja. So I'm curious to see how Tiamat and the others play into the story and whether or not Ozdaja actually makes an appearance. Next, we see Fandaniel being kind of creepy in one of those towers, as he does before he comes out and talks to Xenos a little bit, but we'll get to him in a minute. This transitions over to Thancred and Urion J talking in Radzat Han, one of the new locations we'll be going to in the new expansion. Urion J says, "The respite afforded this land was but fleeting. The end draws nigh." Now, I'm not sure here whether by this land he means Radzat Han and the Thavnair region, or if he means the source as a whole. I feel like it could go either way. We do know that Radzat Han have a treaty with Garlemald that's allowed them to maintain their independence from the Empire. So I'm thinking that maybe on top of the whole, end of days thing going on, maybe Xenos and old Fan Danny Boy have decided to make a move on Radzat Han. Either way, I am super interested to see what's going on here and pretty sure it's going to be a very relevant point. The very next scene is also new and very exciting. Everyone kind of figured it was coming soon since they've been building up to this for 10 years now. But this is where they revealed that we'll also be traveling to Old Sharlayan. I'm pretty hyped for this, even though I've only been playing the game for a little bit over a year. Sharlayan is brought up very early on in the game with several of our closest allies, including Thancred, Urianger, Y'shtola, etc., either being from there or having studied there enough to become Archons. Now we're finally going there, and it's exactly what I was hoping it was going to be. From what we've seen of the place so far, and from the aesthetic that we've kind of gotten hints of related to Old Sharlayan, I was really hoping for an Alticia kind of situation, like from Final Fantasy 15, and that's pretty much what we got. Like heavy Greek inspiration, waterfront island. Well, I mean, I guess if it's an island, it is waterfront. So, but the fountains, the Greek architecture, etc. And I'm so ready. So this scene in the trailer is kind of an important one. The first thing we see after a fly through of the city is our boy Grahatia. He's standing in a library of sorts. And what's interesting about this, because Graha is definitely the kind of person to be in a library, what's interesting is that the door we fly through, like the camera goes through to get into this room, is locked. And I don't just mean like there's a lock on the handle. There is a gigantic padlock and heavy chains on this door. This is obviously somewhere restricted that you're not supposed to go into. So this kind of gives me the idea that maybe Graha either entered the room through some arcane means, or from his time in Sharlayan, he knows some sort of secret passage or other method into the room. Regardless, we see him reading from a pretty ornate looking book, somewhat reminiscent of the Encyclopedia Eorzeus. And he says, "I knew it. The star still has secrets to tell." And that is the vaguest statement in the trailer, I think. This could mean a million different things. If I had to wager a guess right now, though, I'd say he's probably learned something either about Hydaelyn, either Hydaelyn herself or the planet, or he's learned something about the moon. This revelation could maybe even be what leads us to go to the moon in the first place, and my curiosity is piqued. From here, we stay in Sharlayan. We get a little cut over to a character that I didn't actually recognize. Forchano Leveilleur, who is the eldest son of Louis Soir and the father to a certain pair of Elizin twins, stands in a room in the Forum in Old Sharlayan, and we see that he is very beholden to Sharlayan traditions. Traditions such as completely ignoring the needs and requests of the outside world. We get a quick dialogue between him and Y'shtola where he refuses her request for help, and she says, "Okay, cool, we'll do it without you, but you kind of suck." Then we get another transition to something they've been teasing us with for months. At the end of the MSQ for patch 5.5, we see Xenos finally decide on a new weapon that he's going to fight us with in his glorious battle to end all battles. We just don't actually get to see the weapon. Well, the scene cuts from the Forum and their nice little logarithmic spiral that looks like it's probably really inconvenient for anybody actually sitting in the room, to Xenos sitting on a throne with a gigantic scythe at his feet. And by gigantic, I mean it's absolutely massive. When he stands up, he picks it up and puts it over his shoulder. And the blade itself is like the size of Xenos. It's ridiculous in true Final Fantasy fashion. With his scythe specifically, it looks like it has some Magitech additions to it, as is typical with Empire weapons, as the whole thing with Garleans is that they cannot channel ether. They cannot manipulate ether, so therefore they use Magitech to simulate it. So he's also wearing a new outfit, and he gets up from his throne, looks up at the moon, and we get a shot of Fandaniel not looking too thrilled. I kind of have to wonder here if maybe things aren't going quite as he planned, or maybe Xenos' obsession with the Warrior of Light is just going too far, it's getting in the way, or just he's not quite acting like Fandaniel needs him to for his plans to come to fruition, or maybe, hear me out, he's just an unhappy person. Regardless, it's pretty interesting seeing him so upset with Xenos. Now we kind of cut through everybody, like taking turns looking up at the sky, with the exception of Y'shtola, who is currently just mic dropped on Fortuno and is strutting out of the forum. And there's this really cool transition where we see, we zoom into Xenos' eye and we see a reflection of the moon, which then turns into the Warrior of Light and zooms out just in time to see him attacked by something familiar from behind. Now, this we see that this creature attacking him is the first beast, or the first doom from the Amarat dungeon. And it's not even a contest this time. I guess those 10 extra levels mean a lot, because the Warrior of Light just obliterates it. It's just no contest. So we get a nice shot of the Warrior of Light in his new armor, which is a Paladin main I desperately want, before the camera pulls back and we see the moon, where we're currently standing, and which we suspect holds Zodiark, similar to how Dalamud, the Lesser Moon, held Bahamut. And then we see it eclipse Hydaelyn, and then it cuts over to the title card for the expansion. All in all, there are a lot of exciting things happening in this trailer. The Voidsent attacking Thavnair, a new member of the First Brood is revealed, the new job is revealed, which we'll go into more in a minute. Old Sharlayan is shown, and all of the references to the old expansions in the soundtrack make for a happy nerd. So right after the trailer, we get straight into the new job reveal. They did tell us back in February that it would be a melee job, a melee DPS job, and it would share an armor set with Dragoon, the maiming set. And after months of speculation and debate, we now know that the job will, in fact, be called Reaper. This is a job original to Final Fantasy XIV. It basically looks like they took the Dark Knight and they said, hey man, we know you're pretty edgy as is, but what if we made you edgier? And they give him a scythe and dressed him up like a character from Bloodborne, and I am here for it. So as mentioned, Reaper is a melee DPS class that wields a two-handed scythe, and the only requirements to start the class are 1, to own the Endwalker expansion, and 2, to have at least one other job at level 70. We don't know a lot about the class as of yet, but they did give some information between the keynote address and an interview with Yoshi P with Game Watch after day 1 of FanFest concluded. And again, big thanks to the folks in the Final Fantasy XIV Discord for translating that. The most interesting thing that we learned about the job, in my opinion, is that you're fighting alongside an avatar from the void, from that lightless, extinct world that we have heard so much about. And not only do we fight alongside this avatar, but we act as a host for the avatar as well. In some of the gameplay footage, we see the warrior fighting with the scythe and then bringing the avatar out and then fusing with this avatar to enhance their abilities. We don't know anything else about that really as of yet. Yoshi P did say that he could not say too much about the job other than it's not a pet job. It will function differently from Summoner and Machinist, and instead you'll build up your job gauge through combat and then choose when to use your avatar abilities after. So we also got a little bit more information regarding some of the new zones we'll be visiting in Endwalker. First off, of course, is Old Sharlayan. We saw it in the trailer, and they showed a bit of a walkthrough for the area, and this will be the new player hub city, similar to Limsa Lominsa or the Crystarium. Some of the new areas also included Labyrinthos, an underground dome city with an artificial sun and some odd technology. Thavnair and Radzidhan, areas that played a fairly big part in certain aspects of the story already. We just haven't gotten to go there. We saw some artwork of another zones that seems to be maybe floating in the sky, but they couldn't really give us any more information, not even a name. We got some new images of a pretty ominous and desolate looking Garlemald, And lastly, we got some information on an area called Mare Lamentorum, which is on the moon. They do mention there's a reason for the air and the gravity on the moon, but I'm more interested in why the zone's music, the background music, shares a theme or a motif with Amarat. And of course, to find any of this out, they said we'll have to play through the story. They talked a little bit about some of the new encounters that we'll have in the expansion, including the Mega Sisters, originally from Final Fantasy IV, but with a unique iteration of them, and Loporits, the new Beast Tribe, which are essentially the Hummingway from Final Fantasy IV. And both of these groups will play an important part in the story. That's all they had for new encounters, but I'm positive there will be more when the expansion actually releases in November. New dungeons come with every expansion and every patch, and Endwalker isn't any different. They didn't give us any names for the new dungeons they showed off, but they did show some video footage of 2 new duties. One looks to take place inside one of the towers that have been popping up around Eorzea, and it has a very organic look to it, for lack of a better word. The walls seem almost fleshy. There's a doorway that looks like it's in the form of a giant mouth. The other dungeon looks like it might be in Labyrinthos or somewhere similar, and it reminded me a bit of somewhere like Gubal Library or Anamnesis Annider. Now, typically, I'm not big on Alliance raids. They're usually fun a time or two, but they're not really my favorite piece of content. However, I am excited about the upcoming 24-person raid, Myths of the Realm. They didn't show much. They did show a piece of artwork and said that we would explore more about the 12. Now, if you're not familiar with the 12, this is the name of the pantheon in Eorzea. In lore, the 12 used to rule over the lands on Hydaelyn until the wandering tribes, such as the Lalafell, the Hyur, the Elezen, came. And at that point, the 12 entrusted the world to the tribes, and some of them became patron deities of like the city-states. They played a pretty huge part in Final Fantasy XIV's original story in 1.0, but we haven't really dealt much with them since, so I'm excited to see more about them. Lastly, they talked a little bit more about the release date, pre-order bonuses, the collector's edition, etc., but we're not going to cover that here in depth just because this video is probably going to be long enough as is. There was one more big announcement, though. A lot of people were hoping for it, but I don't think most people were actually expecting it to come. At the very end of the keynote, they showed off a somewhat new playable race. When Viera and Hrothgar released, they said they wouldn't be adding any more races to the game, but it was pretty noticeable that we were missing 2 things, male Viera and female Hrothgar. Now, with the release of 6.0, male Viera will be a playable race. They didn't forget about female Hrothgar. Initially, they wanted to release both at the same time, but at this point have determined that while male Viera will release in 6.0, female Hrothgar just won't quite be ready yet at that point. There you have it, pretty much all of the major announcements from the FanFest keynote address and from the trailer. I'm pretty sure there are plenty of details in the trailer that I didn't get to, largely because I am still relatively new to Final Fantasy XIV and not super well versed in the lore yet, but I am trying. Also, I know this was a little bit late for people hoping for maybe a wrap-up video that maybe didn't get to watch, but because of some work events, I also wasn't able to watch live and had to slowly parse through all this information over the course of the week. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel to grow and to be seen. Also, be sure to let me know what other kinds of content you want to see in the future. I have not given up on the old school RuneScape series quite yet. Like I said, the last couple of weeks have been super busy at my full-time job, and I will have the next part ready soon. I might try to do some more of these informational news videos going forward, maybe on Final Fantasy XIV, maybe big news for some other games. We'll just have to kind of see what happens and what you guys want to see. So be sure to drop a comment and let me know. That's it for this week. Be sure to hit the bell icon to get notified the next time a video goes live, and I will see you then.